Hey Nerdpreneurs, so today I have a bonus episode for you. This is called 26 Minutes With. It's with a guy named David Cohen. He approached us to do an interview and I was able to step in and do that, so no Frank in this episode, but I do talk about him a little bit. Even though it's called 26 Minutes With, we did talk for almost an hour and a half. So there's some real good content in here. We cover a wide breadth of different subjects, from finding your passion in people to taking your ideas and turning them into a business. We go a little bit into my story and how I came up in business. And we talk about some of the most important insights that I've gained from interviewing nerdpreneurs all over the world. So I think you're really going to like it. So without further ado, here is 26 Minutes With and David Cohen.
Keep it nerdy. Keep it nerdy. Keep it real nerdy. Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first. Let them rap a verse so they can all be heard.
Yeah, my nerdy passion basically is drawing.
Correct. I'm a breeder of tarantulas, importing tarantulas and some other critters.
I am a harpist. I do mainly Celtic harp, video game songs, songs from nerdy TV shows.
Obviously, I'm big on Star Trek.
It is creature design, fantastical biological creations out of watercolor.
We are dice retailers.
Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first, so let them rap a verse so they can all be heard.
Hey, welcome to this week's edition of 26 Minutes With, the show that honors those who are leading, making an impact, and creating positive change on the planet and, of course, locally. I'm your host, David Cohen, and I'm really pleased to have this week's guest with us, Chris Saunders. He's a pro GM, rapper, co-host of the Nerdpreneur podcast. He's a coach. He does work with Jeff Walker from the famous for the book Launch, and shows you how to launch your your content online. And I really recommend you tapping into the book Launch by Jeff Walker and his work. And somewhere along the line, if you study with Jeff, you might meet Chris, which I had the pleasure of about a month ago. And we got to talking, and he told me about this podcast that he does called Nerdpreneur. And I went, oh, that's interesting. So this week we're going to lighten it up. We've been doing some heavy duty topics, Chris, the past 2 weeks around leadership and youth justice, and we got to lighten things up. So now at Nerdpreneur, they have fun conversations with people who turn their weird passion into successful businesses. They interview entrepreneurs from around the world to discover the hacks, the tools, the mindsets that turn nerd passion into full-time income. They've interviewed dozens of niche professionals from all over the world, including board game designers, dice retailers, D&D content creators, Dungeons and Dragons, tarantula breeders, and even a German zombie magician. I was going to say musician. That would be interesting. Like your vibe, man.
That'll be next season.
Yeah. Don't put it past anybody. So if you want to listen to Chris and Frank, his co-host, talk nerdy about Gen Z and millennial entrepreneurship, current trends affecting the nerd markets, and why 3 cats is too many cats, then you want to tap into Nerdpreneur. So welcome, Chris. Good to see you, man.
Thanks, David. I'm super excited to be here today on 26 Minutes With, and I appreciate that you wanted to have me on, and I'm excited about what we're going to dive into today. Nerdpreneur has been my passion project for the last year and a half, maybe a little bit less than that. But, I don't know, where do we go from here? Do you want me to start talking about that, or how it got started?
All kinds of questions ready for you.
Perfect.
So you said a year and a half ago, how did it come together? What was the genesis of it?
Well, let me get into that. if you go back a few years, we all had kind of a collective human experience called the COVID pandemic, right? And there was lots of challenges and lots of things that were kind of rough for people across the entire globe, right? We all had this collective experience. Now, the thing I noticed is that how you react to those types of situations really determines someone's quality of life and success. And I think when I was going through that situation, I was on Instagram and I was a bit on TikTok, and I saw that there was this group of people that were reacting in a really different way than I think what, say, news media was portraying, or what a lot of people were portraying. And they were actually, because their jobs were shut down, or because they worked in restaurants and now nobody can go to a restaurant, they started to have no other option but to put out content and see if they could actually do something with their nerdy passion. And I can't tell you how many people I saw that had this almost like positive, I'd say, reaction to being forced to kind of be home. And they started to attract people online by putting out content that was really interesting. And then I started to see all these people who said to them, who said, maybe I can make money at this. And it was a range of different niches. Like I said, we've interviewed people. I started mainly in the Dungeons and Dragons niche, because that's where I was building my own sort of content, and I was building my own little business. And I had put out a podcast in that niche a few months ago, or a few years ago before that. And so I noticed that there were all these Dungeons and Dragons creators that were attracting like tens of thousands of people to their Instagrams or to their TikToks. And then many of them were starting to produce content, and they were, and by that, I mean like stuff that you could actually pay for, either gated content, or you could support them on Patreon. There was a guy who was doing like music for your Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And then I started thinking about it. Well, these are like entrepreneurs, but they're not like typical entrepreneurs like a Grant Cardone, where they're very money motivated. You know what I mean? And I respect Grant and everything, and I mean, he's great for sales. But I'll just say that that hustle culture thing isn't really my vibe. I'm all about ambition and making money and creating impacts, but it was that hustle culture, like doing something you really love. And I saw these people doing stuff with unique and weird niches, and I thought of the phrase nerdpreneur, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's cool. Actually, you know what I thought of first was I thought of entrepreneur, which many people have talked to me about before. Yeah, that's also a good one. But I couldn't get the real estate for that, right? I couldn't get the online stuff, and somebody else already had it. They weren't doing anything with it. But here's what I did find was nerdpreneur, and I found my co-host who I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with, and I thought, this guy, he kind of has that ambition. And the way I describe it is, you got to look for your spirit warrior, somebody who can kind of get you in terms of, where you're going, your passion level, what you're excited about. And this guy, Frank, my co-host, he kind of had all those things, but he's also different than me. Like he has different skill sets, a different perspective on a lot of things. And I love that, because I didn't want to be, doing the co-host thing with someone who has exactly the same, perspective as I do. Yeah. And so we wound up talking and doing a couple of these interviews, just honestly with a couple of friends of ours who we'd known were starting in this path. And it wound up being some really cool interviews. Like you'll hear the first episode is with a board game designer. And it was really kind of rough. Like I drew up a bunch of questions, and I said, maybe we'll just start with these questions that we ask with people. And it really led to some cool and interesting topics and conversations with this guy who was a board game designer. And all of a sudden we were like, man, maybe this could be something. And everyone I talked to about it, it's like, yeah, it's called Nerdpreneur. And people, it's like, I like that name. And I think it's a little more fun than entrepreneur, like it kind of just feels like, because you know what, we put being nerdy first. You're following your nerdy passion first, and then you're bringing a business out of it. So Nerdpreneur made more sense than that.
And you got the .com, which is amazing.
Yeah, we got that. We got nerdpreneurpodcast.com, or at nerdpreneurpod on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. So it all kind of fell into place. And what was funny is because I had a bit of a following on Instagram, my Instagram is Professor Epic Productions. That's where I put like my music stuff and sort of my own D&D content out. But I had about 8,000 people or so roughly who were following me. I could reach out to these people who sometimes had like 10,000 or 15,000 or sometimes 50 or 60,000 people. And we've even had people have over 100,000 people on our podcast now that actually would respond to me, and I'd be like, oh, cool, they're actually going to talk and interact with us. And that's one of the kind of keys, I think, to building your network, is responding to people who message you. And I thought it would be a big sales pitch to get them on the podcast, but so many of them were like, oh my God, you want to talk to me about my business and my passion? I'm in. Totally, I want to talk to you. And I just thought, nobody else is highlighting these stories. There's so many people that have reacted positively to this negative COVID situation, and they've actually figured out something they're passionate about, that they're excited about, and they found a way to make it and monetize it, so that so many of them don't go back to that old job. Most of the people that we found started this were the stories of people who, discovered a passion and then also turned it into a business that became their full-time income. And there's just so many of those stories out there in weird and unique niches. I figured, let's go and discern those strategies, figure out what's working for them, and also elevate those stories so that others are inspired to do it too. We want to inspire people, because it's never been a better time in life to start your own business and pursue your passion.
Yeah, and a lot of businesses, got hit then, and still continue to this day. There's still a lot of struggling with business. So why not? It's almost like, here, you got the keys to the kingdom. Freedom, baby. Go do what you really love to do. Is there a common thread to the personality of these nerdpreneurs? As far as, is there a common thread personality-wise to these business owners and businesses?
I think there is, in that, when you look at nerd, one of our key questions that we ask almost every guest is, what is your definition of a nerd? And I think that one of the things that I've noticed is many people are nerdy about many different things. So and I guess the main thing that brings them all together is that they're driven by their excitement. They're driven by their passion. They found something that they really are in some ways kind of obsessed about, and whether it be a Dungeons and Dragons writing, or whether it be manufacturing and designing dice. Like we have an episode coming up, not sure when this will come out, might be out by the time this is out, but it was we have a guy who runs what's called Aether Objects, and he's an artistic dice maker. And so, like, dice is a weird, nerdy thing, but for him, he's driven by, like, I didn't want to just make money with my dice. We had a dice retailer on where they were like restaurant owners, and they turned into dice retailers because they were kind of passionate about making D&D. But this guy is different than that. He actually wanted to make like really interesting artistic dice. So he's made dice out of, like, I wonder if I can make it out of wood and have it be really cool. So he's made like rosewood ones. He made one. He's like, I wonder if I could make it out of metal, and this kind of metal. And so he'll do that. He actually had one that was sort of it was really strange, but he's like, yeah, I actually had an old Mac laptops, and he like constructed it out of pieces from old Mac laptops that he like molded and cut into pieces that he perfectly placed. So he's selling stuff that is really handmade, high quality, but has sort of like this artistic bend to it. So going back to your original question, it's about the passion. They are driven by, like, on their terms, what they're excited about, and then finding a way to kind of deliver that to the audience in a way that makes sense. And then they actually say, hey, if you want to support me, come buy it, or support my Patreon or something like that. They've kind of stumbled into business. None of them are really entrepreneurs for the most part, is what I've noticed. Most of them have kind of started with something great, and then they noticed people asking them, like, oh my gosh, this is so good, can I buy it? Or, oh my gosh, can I support you in some way? Or can we do more with this? And they would actually do that, and people loved it. They wound up being like, man, maybe this could be a business. And nerdpreneurs tend to go through a very similar process, is what I've noticed, is they start with just like that passion. And the thing about passion is when you're doing something a lot, you get good at it. So they take that passion, and it leads to kind of their skill. And then when they get that skill, all of a sudden they get attention for that skill. And from that attention, often they get what I call their first sale. That's a milestone. When
Yeah.
somebody's willing to pay you money for something. So it comes out of being good, having skill, but the first time someone comes around and be like, okay, I'm going to pay you money for this, that's a huge milestone for them. And all of our nerdpreneurs have gone through that step where they get a first sale, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, proof of concept. And in the marketing business, we kind of call that a funnel. It's like, okay, now I know how did I got this person to say yes to a product, whatever that is. Now it's about figuring out how to scale that and make that at a much higher rate, or a much more consistent rate, so that they can be able to get more people. And that's really a huge, huge deal for a lot of these nerdpreneurs, is figuring out the ins and outs of how do you scale this to the point where I can, have 100 clients in a month, or I could have 1,000 clients in a month, depending on what it is that they're actually doing. And most of them go through kind of a critical mass point where people are really supporting them, and they actually can support themselves on this nerdy passion. But none of them have been really big entrepreneurs going in with business degrees and all this other stuff. There's a couple, but very few of the nerdpreneurs we've interviewed have had that background. Most of them have just been driven by passion and kind of stumbled into success and figured it out as they go.
Yeah. No incubators and no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is there somebody that else that's made a big impact on you the most, and what were they doing that grabbed your attention? You just shared a really good example. Would that be one of the entrepreneurs or nerdpreneurs that's made a big impact on you, or is there somebody else that you went, wow, that got you, like it just
There is one. And I often tell people, if they're going to start the podcast, usually start with this episode, because I think it's one of our best episodes that we did. It's with a guy whose name is Monkey DM. Now that's not his real name. His real name is Evan, but he's actually somebody that is branded himself Monkey DM. And his story is really interesting. And I think when I was designing the idea of, okay, what is a nerdpreneur? And who would that be that we want on the podcast? His profile and who he was really the main driver of that. He was kind of the epitome for me of what that represented. And so, yeah. So what he did, his story is funny, because what happened for him was he started he's in Romania. Let's start off with that. So he's in Romania, and in Romania, he was taking school to be a doctor, and he actually did all of his medical doctor degree and everything. And then the next step after that is to go and be a residency doctor, right? So you have to actually apply. Now he's I believe French by nature. He learned German so he could apply to various places in Germany. And so he didn't want to be a doctor in Romania, even though he got his degree there, because the money for Romanian doctors is only about 800, 900 American a month, roughly, or something like that. It's pretty low for a doctor to make there. So he was residency trying to do that in different places, but he had bad timing. He was applying the same year that COVID hit. So no one was doing anything with new doctors. And maybe he even admits this, maybe I wasn't good enough to get in there, but also it sounds like nobody was getting hired and nobody knew what was going on. So it was just shut all that down. We're not letting anyone new in. And to be in that situation in Romania, where he was done with school, he didn't have any real job prospects. He couldn't pursue what he wanted to do, which was all his life to become a doctor. Right. And now he was just stuck and broke and really in a kind of difficult situation. So he did play D&D. He kind of liked it. It wasn't it was just something he saw, that somebody on Reddit was actually making money from doing content. So he saw some people who were kind of in his mind really big, oh my gosh, they're making $1,000 a month. Well, man, if I could make $200 a month, I'd be fine in Romania. I could at least be able to eat and get by and do something, right? So he thought, maybe I'll just try and see what happens. So he started he references the thank you economy from Gary Vaynerchuk, where you give, and then ask, right? So exactly, right? So he was just thinking, you know what? Let's do that. I'll just give a bunch of free stuff on Unearthed Arcana, which is a Reddit stream for what we call homebrew content. So he was making up kind of his own version of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons content. And what was so cool is after about 3 months, he did a launch in some sense of a compendium of all of his work. And he said, hey, I've been giving this away for free for a while. If you want to support me, come do this. And he wound up going from really just a couple of bucks a month in Patreon all the way up to $800 a month on Patreon in that 3 months. And so really saved his life in that way. And what was cool is that proof of concept. Now he kind of creates content every month. And to give you an idea where he's gone, even since then, I mean, we interviewed him when he was around $9,000 a month that he was making from his Dungeons and Dragons content. Yeah, that's not nothing. That's a full-time income. And of course, he doesn't get all of that. There's expenses. He pays for art and all that sort of thing, but he's able to live very comfortably in Romania doing what he's doing. He's since grown even further past that to now he's now over 15, almost 16,000 in Patreon support. Of course, Patreon takes their cut, and I want to make sure everybody understands that. But the real thing is he also has done an almost $2 million, maybe it was over $2 million Kickstarter that for his content. And it's called Steinhardt, if you're not sure what it is and you want to look it up. But it's a really awesome story. Imagine going to your parents and saying, like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to be a doctor. And then, like, you can't get a job as a doctor. How crazy is that, right? Yeah. And then he had to go into his passion. And it actually wound up being something that he's not only making more money than he would have as a doctor in Romania, he's way more successful. He's got a real knack for business. And I don't know, I can't speak for him, but it sounds like he's pretty happy. He sounds like he loves what he's doing and pursuing this passion. So if you check out that episode, you'll hear a lot about his story. And we go into a lot more about how that story happened and the logistics behind creating that business of his and building it from the ground up.
I'll put the link underneath.
It's episode interview number 10, if anyone's wondering.
Okay. Now, how about you? Where did you get these performing chops? I mean, you rap, you produce content, you host podcasts, you sold knife sets.
Yes.
Passions and talents all come together, Chris.
Well, I was raised, I think, to my dad is somebody who's always had sort of high standards in my life. And so, I went to school, and when you go to school, I just was expected to get great grades. That was one area, but I wasn't but I was also expected to not just do well in school. Like I couldn't spend all my time studying. I remember when I was a kid, I would read a lot, which is always like, sometimes you want your kids reading a lot, but I remember my dad would get, mad at me for just sitting around reading all day. He's like, no, you have to go out and like, you have to play sports. You have to go out and be artistic. You have to, do stuff that's different. Go use your creativity. And like, they would just kick me out of the house sometimes and be like, go, you have to go outside to go do something. And so I think because of that push from my parents on both sides to be a go-getter and to be balanced in that way, they were really they were really great that way. I was very lucky, I think, because my parents they rarely said no to anything I wanted to try. They said, hey, play piano when you're a kid. Now, I never really got good at piano. I played it for a while. I got to like grade 2, but they never said no. They put me in piano because it was a good thing to do. And I think that helped, I think also when I got into high school, I got into theater, and there was something about being on stage and speaking lines and being able to do that. And the attention that I got at that moment was really, really great for me. And so there was this thing in mind that created a spark. And then I thought to myself, if I'm going to go to university, I didn't want to go to university to get a job. I had many teachers and people who were, around my school saying, take what you want to do in school, pursue your passion. And I think that was just a message I heard from a lot of different places. And so when I went to university, I could have done a lot of things like business or whatever, but I actually decided after my first year in university to apply to go to the theater program there. Wow. And so I went to theater school at University of Toronto. I got in. It was a great place to be, I think, practically trained in skill sets like performing and, getting up on stage. And there's a lot of things that I use still to this day that came out of that theater degree. A lot of people, I think, at least a lot of my friends went to school for, say, business or science and engineering. And it's not that I had a bit of an aptitude. I probably would not have done well as an engineer. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to pretend like I was an amazing science student. I wasn't. I did theater. I did a lot of art stuff in school. But But I think that the skill sets that I got out of it are things that I still use to this day. When I get up on stage or have to do a talk or I have to connect with people, the ability to manage my emotions under, say, stressful or pressure situations, a lot of that came out of my training in theater, and the ability to just kind of like fail as well. I got over a lot of the fear of failure, fear of looking kind of stupid. And I realized that in order to be good at something, you have to surrender to being bad at it for a little while. You have to be willing to be bad at something in order to get good. And I learned that through theater. Like there was a lot of things you would try when you're doing a monologue or doing a scene that just doesn't work. And so by failing over and over, you eventually find the things that really resonate and work in a show.
Sure.
And and then by the end, you're getting this finished product that you show to the world. So that's always kind of how I've operated, I guess, is, I prepare, I work through things, and I'm willing to fail. And then I get out to the world with something a lot more confident, a lot more prepared, and a lot more ready for people to appreciate.
And I think that's really important too in a business context, especially if you're a nerdpreneur. But, you've got to be willing to fail. And in our society, we're not trained to fail. And, it floors people and they don't get back off the mat ever again. And it's like, no, learn from your failures and study it and try again and keep trying until you get it. And, it's like, probably when you made calls selling
when I was selling knives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could do a whole bit on, like, I didn't even get to the point of where I was like selling knives. I've had so many great coaches and people who helped me through that company, selling Cutco knives. They were honestly a huge impact, and not an easy job. I don't want to make it seem like it was easy.
No,
in fact, it was
a lot of doors slammed in your face.
Well, it was actually a very, very difficult job for somebody to do, because I was mostly commissioned. There is a base pay, but if you were on base pay, you weren't making a lot, and so it was mostly about getting results. And it's very common for people to attach their results to their ego. And so when you're in sales, and especially if you get off to a great start, if you sell a lot and people recognize you for it and you start to believe, man, I'm really good at this, I'm really awesome at this. And then you don't realize that initial first few appointments might have just been kind of beginner's luck, or because you were seeing, say, friends and family and people who were nicer, you doing practice appointments. And then, I remember when I got my first no sale, because I had gone like sale, like 7 in a row. When I got my first no sale, I remember, my the client being like, is this your first no sale? Like, it was kind of shocking to me that someone didn't buy. I thought everybody was going to just buy, but that was such an important experience to go through, because you start to realize, like, okay, being no sales are a part of your success. I always say, like, failure and success are on the same coin. Okay. Yes. And so you have to have both. If I look back on my actual, say, first 10 days or my first summer, where I did sell a lot of knives, I sold almost $18,000 in 3 months or something like that, which is very, very solid for at least the time period when I was doing it.
You would have put Hal Elrod to shame.
I don't know about that. Hal Elrod was like one of the best out there, but I also learned a lot from him, actually, because I met him a number of times, because he would speak at these conferences.
Yeah.
Shout out to The Miracle Morning. It's a great book. Yeah. But I'll say this, that I look back on that and I'd have to add up, I did this many appointments. It might have been 30 appointments in my first 10 days, or it might have been 100 appointments in my first month, whatever it was. But if I did 100 appointments in my first month, I probably had 40 no sales. Okay. And that was part of my success. So the way I would look at it is, I got more failures than most people even did demos. There are people that I worked with that they would only do 10 appointments in a week, and if they only did 10 appointments in a week, they might have got 6 or 7 or even 8 sales if they were all really good at it. But they only got 2 no sales, but they actually went up selling less than me than if I did 20 appointments, right? Or even 30 appointments, because I would actually get 10 no sales, whereas they did just 10 appointments, and I would have way more sales because failure was part of their success. So I always said, I succeeded more, but I also failed more than most people. And so being willing to fail more, being willing to do that gives you the option of having bigger and bigger success.
Yeah, no kidding. And also it stretches you because, after probably your 10th no sale, you're kind of feeling a bit like, I don't like this, right? So it stretches you to be creative, try new things, maybe try new attempts or ways to connect with people, or even
being willing to help.
And sorry, go ahead. Be willing.
Being willing to get help. That was a big part of it, right? Like when I started to actually, like I remember when I was, moving, when I basically, my first summer, I did pretty well. I was in the flow of it. Then I went back to school. My second summer, I came back as an assistant manager. And as an assistant manager, I was expected to sell a lot, right? And expected to lead the team and also to teach people who were who were new, just getting started, how I was getting success. Now, I hadn't really sold knives in like 8 months. And so you're a little bit rusty, right? So I remember going out and I got like one sale for a set in my first like couple of demos. And I'm like, all right, sweet, great. I'm doing that great. And then I went on a string of, I want to say 13 or 14 no sales in a row. It was very like boom, 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 boom. Like, man, am I still good at this? And you start to have those conversations like, can I really do this? Is this going to work out? Am I, in a position that I can't do anymore? Have I lost that sales mojo or whatever it was? And I remember at that moment, I was like, okay, I have a choice here. I can either quit, right? Try to find something else, or I can kind of dig in on what I'm doing and get some help. And and I said, you know what? I'm going to go out and try to get some help. So I went to my managers. I went to the people who I was, on the team with. I started listening to closing talks online. And I'll tell you, like, just by listening to that stuff over and over and over again on my way to and from my appointments, the I don't know if it's just the resonance. I think part of it is like, if you fill your brain with good things and you fill your brain with things that'll help you, it actually does give you a different level of energy when you go in, a different level of expectation, a different level of confidence. Even if you haven't had the result yet, by putting good stuff into your brain, it moves the needle. And I remember when I was asked to field train the president of the company because he happened to live in the city. Like, I remember it was kind of a big deal because the president of the company was like, I want him to go on some demos. Who's the assistant manager in my area? And I was the guy who was coming off 13 no sales in a row, having not really had a lot of success. He saw me go through a demo. It was a no sale, but then he wound up taking me to for a coffee, and we had a conversation, and he gave me a couple of like just nuanced tips, and also was just like, hey, you're really good at this. It's actually really, he gave me a little encouragement, right? And I'll tell you, that next demo, I sold almost $1,000. It was like a total flip in terms of my mentality. So being willing to, push through those points where it's discomfort and hard, and ask for help to keep moving. Because if what you're doing is not working, like, keep finding answers, keep looking for them. There are answers to be found. And I remember that my whole life, just, if something's not going well, be willing to ask for help and go to the people who know how to get that success. You're going to find it.
All right, I'm going to run out of racetrack on our 26 minutes.
I know, I'll talk for a while if you give me a chance.
Oh, it's great. We're with Chris Saunders, and we're talking about nerdpreneurs, but we're also talking about the entrepreneurial journey too, a little bit. And so real quick, before we wrap this part up, because we're going to go to the deeper dive, I have a few more questions for you.
Hey there, Nerdpreneur. Frank here, jumping into Chris's chat. Just wanted to say that we really love putting this show together. We love doing it. And we love creating these opportunities for nerdpreneurs like yourself to learn and to share our stories with you in the hopes that you're going to get some sort of wisdom out of it. But putting this show on isn't easy, and it does take a lot of time. You can help us though, and ensure that the show continues by going on over to patreon.com and joining our board of nerdpreneurs. There, you're not just going to be supporting the show and making sure that it continues, but you will also be getting all of our content, all of the unedited episodes in their glorious nature, and we've got quite a backlog of them too. So head on over to patreon.com and join our board of nerdpreneurs. Thank you for being a nerdpreneur and supporting our show. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So this is the deeper dive segment where we go a little bit deeper with Chris. So beforehand, we were talking about, don't be afraid to fail and try new things. And then we talked to you about, I asked you what the question that I asked you is, where did you get all these passions and talents? How did they come together? And you mentioned, growing up and the influence of your parents, but also studying theater at school. And we were talking just offline just now about, improv, that I mentioned I'd studied improv too. And you brought up something really important in terms of I was taught, don't try and be funny, just be in the moment, listen. Do you want to expand on that? Because you had some really cool insights to share.
Yeah, well, the thing that when we were in theater school, I remember one of the first things that they would have us do is a improv, but it wasn't like what you see on Whose Line It Is It Anyway? It's not like trying to be funny. It was actually, this is the scenario. It's a fairly serious scenario. Usually it has to do with, this is your girlfriend and she has something she's not telling you and you need to find a way to address that in the room, and that's the situation. Go. And or it could be like, we had one where it was called Old Smells. This one is actually what really sticks out to me when I think back, and the reason they call it Old Smells is because the situation was, you're almost a memory from the past. You're a person from this person's past, and you're coming back in to their life at that moment and create a scenario around that. And I remember my friend and I were doing this scenario where I had gone to jail for a while based on something that we had both kind of done around stealing a stereo. And the whole thing was, when you get into this room again, you kind of you have these old smells, you remember them, and it brings you back to that place. So when we go through, they had set up a little scenario, and we're looking, and it's like, oh wow, this is kind of like the old place. I just got out of jail, and then I'm connecting with him, and he's a little different, but I'm still that same kind of guy, and the energy that I have in that. And so what happens is, in those moments where you're not trying to be funny, you're just trying to be real, you're trying to be authentic, you really have to listen to what your partner is saying to you and then react to that. So much of acting is reacting, and in order to properly act, you have to listen. And if you're sitting there trying to think of what's the next thing I'm going to say while the other person's talking, you lose the whole thread and you lose the audience. But when you really sit there and listen and remain authentic to the scene, to what's happening and what someone is doing or saying or acting towards you, that's where the magic happens. And that's where, I'll tell you, we had some very, very funny things come out of that scene. I remember, noticing the stereo that had been stolen in the place and like reacting to it in that moment, and then being like, oh, cool, that's awesome. And then it kind of comes to a climax where he's telling me, dude, I'm not the same guy. You can't stay here, And my first reaction, because I was really listening and that moment really hit me, was, I'm taking the stereo. I was like, that was my character's moment, was like, I'm taking the thing I stole because it's mine, right? But that authenticity in that moment wasn't something I could have planned for. It wasn't something I could have set up or written. It was something that came out of the moment, and the entire class erupts in laughter. You get that authentic, real connection because they felt that was the real thing for me in that moment. And that's where the audience reacted in laughter with it. So, listen, that's a really big tip there.
And it's a big tip, not only for that field, but also, being in business, listening to your customer. You work with Jeff Walker on the product launch formula. That's really getting to know your customer first and know the niche and know what they want, and then offering a tailor-made sort of solution for them.
Yeah, a great entrepreneur. Well, I learned a lot of this in sales because so many people. I remember there was a great salesperson in our company named John Berghoff, and he's the one who taught this. But he said people people don't buy because they understand. They buy because they feel understood.
Yes.
And that was a huge shift in the way that I sold, and the ability for me to instead tell you all about this. Let me tell you all the features, tell you all the benefits, tell you how much it's worth, how great it is, and here's the price. Do you want to buy it? Like all of that was sort of
It's
that.
kind of
That's
old
not.
school selling.
Yeah, like it didn't really work the way that I wanted it to. And so in actuality, when I talked less, asked more questions, and really listened so that I could help that person find the right thing for them, as opposed to telling them what they should buy or what it is. I could make recommendations based on what they were saying. Then they felt understood. One of the things I would say was we would always present, some people would only present one set, the biggest set, and say, this is the best set because they're trying to sell the biggest thing. And what I would always do was I'd say, there are really three sets of knives that work for everybody. There's this really big one for people who love cooking. They do it all the time. They want to entertain and they want the biggest and best thing. And that's awesome if that's you. Now, we also have this one, which is more for people who just, cooking sometimes is fun. Sometimes it's a chore. You just got to basically get it done sometimes. And sometimes you're going to entertain, but you're not looking for, the biggest and brightest all the time. But then there's this one, which is our smaller set, but it's really for people who just don't want to get in and out of the kitchen as quick as possible. This is not their passion. This is just very practical. Now, it would be a big set, a very big set, I should say, a big set, and then a slightly less big set, right? But by saying that, I would then say, based on what you've told me and what I've seen from, going through this, I think this set would be the best set for you. Would you agree with that? And then they know I'm looking out for them. I actually would even say, I don't think this really big set is good for you based on what you told me. It's just too many things. You probably will be like, this won't work. And they're like, yeah, that's totally me. I'm never going to use that many knives. Great. What about this one? And then they would say, yes, that one, that's way more. Now they're telling me I want to buy this set. So then I can go into detail on it and really help them feel understood, and then, serve them at the highest level there. So listening and making them feel understood was a big, big tip in selling and sales.
Yeah. All amazing advice. So those watching, listening, hope you're taking notes. So these are good notes to take. I want to go back to Nerdpreneur, but before I do, I'd be remiss. You're a young guy. How did the relationship and what was it, that the Jeff Walker people saw in you? Because, he's in the league of, he mentioned, Tony Robbins and, some of the big names. How did you connect with him? What
That's a great story, actually. I will tell you, I tell people this even in Jeff's company, because they often wonder, like, how did you get into this company, right? Because Jeff is somebody who's been around a long time in the digital marketing space, and so if you're not sure who he is, if you're anywhere in digital marketing and you talk to, say, Russell Brunson or people like Tony Robbins or some of those big names, everybody who's in the industry knows Jeff and credits Jeff for really inventing modern day digital marketing. He's kind of like, what they call the OG of digital marketing. And I love that because, he really does sell a product that, one, works. He's a very humble guy. He's not like out there trying. He's not a Grant Cardone. I don't know why I keep shitting on Grant Cardone. I don't know if I can swear in here, but not.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't know. I don't know why I keep doing that with Grant Cardone. I like the guy, but he's very much a different personality to someone like Jeff. I really liked the way Jeff was as far as his personality. So the way I found him, okay, I'll just say that he's a very humble guy. It's not about the money for him. He's really about the impact that his people, and one of his messages, what is to change the world through entrepreneur heroes. Okay. So it's not about like, let's make everybody rich. Change the world positively, bring positive things to the world through entrepreneurship and, treating yourself like a hero that can actually do something and serve a really important segment of the community. So that's one of the reasons that I really align with him, is that it's just feel like, if it's not about the money, it's about following your passion, about doing it. It all makes sense. And that kind of aligns with Nerdpreneur. But how did I find Jeff? Because it's kind of funny. I was in sales, like I said, for 13 plus years. I worked with Cutco, and I was a manager. So I was doing a lot of things straight commission for 13 years. That was what I was on. And you have ups and downs and seasons in that kind of business, you know? And so, I was always about personal growth. I'm always looking for bigger and better things and how to do my job better. How could I bring more value to the people that I'm serving, which were my sales reps and the company there. So I listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast, which is when it first came out, he was just interviewing a bunch of different people. And one of those people, I think it might have been his like 8th or 9th or 10th episode, something like that, was Susan Garrett. Now, Susan Garrett is the probably number one, I want to say best dog agility trainer in the world. I don't own a dog. I don't know why I was listening to this episode, but I did. And I always say, if I'm listening to something, there's probably something in dog training I can use. Let me see. And the thing that came out of it was they were talking about launching her courses online. And she said, oh, well, I read the book Launch from Jeff Walker, and it was awesome. And then Tim Ferriss perks up and it says, oh, that book. Yeah, that's the best book ever written on launching. And I'm like, well, the best book ever written on launching, that sounds pretty cool. I could probably use launching to help me promote my conferences or some of these sales events that I'm doing. Let me just order that on Amazon. So I ordered it and I read the book. And of course, if you're writing a book, one of the objectives is to get people on your list. So it's a lead magnet for your list. So I got into the list on there and I said, hey, I'll listen to his emails. And I want you to see, like, I don't really read a lot of emails. Jeff is not like necessarily the person that resonates with me. He's a little bit older and that's fine. I respected a lot of what his wisdom was, but I didn't watch a lot of his videos. I probably never even clicked on any of his emails. And I just was on his list for months and months, maybe even a year or two. And on a bad day where I was like, struggling a little bit financially, struggling a little bit with just the difficulty of my situation at home. I was living with a girl I wasn't super excited about at that time, and I was a little stuck. I remember thinking to myself, do I want to keep going down this path with the job that I'm in? And in my inbox, I want to say that day or that night was an email from Jeff that said, we're looking for people. And it was for some admin thing. It was before Launch Club was even a thing, but I noticed in their copy, the sales copy, they said, oh, we're looking for superstars. And I had just read a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine by
Chet Holmes. Sure.
Yeah, Chet Holmes, one of the greatest sales books ever written. If you want to read one of the best sales books, one of the best ones, hands down. I work with Tony Robbins, amazing. But one of his things was all about how to attract superstars. And I thought to myself, I might want to be in this company just based on the fact that they're reading the same thing as I am. And I might be able to fit in with that. So I just sent my resume, not knowing anything about it. I had never done digital marketing, really. I knew how to sell, though. So I sent my resume in. They sent back an email the next day saying, hey, everybody, not everybody, they said, hey, you stood out from the applications. I learned later that they basically sent this to everybody.
Okay.
Over 300 people got this message saying, hey, you should apply, but you need to do this questionnaire and you need to do a 3-minute YouTube video telling us why you would be a great fit for our company. Now that was a game changer for me because I had looked at other jobs and applied, and I hated applying for jobs, like going through all the resume stuff. And then you can send your resume, but then they also have you fill in a form, and then you're like and your hours trying to figure out more about the company to answer these questions properly. And I was just like, so much easier if I just do a video. That's really cool. And then I also thought to myself, let's go look at the competition, because they wanted us to post it on YouTube under the thing, Go Get 'Em Jeff Walker. And so I could just Google that or go to YouTube and put in Go Get 'Em Jeff Walker. And I would find all these videos from people who had posted them. And you know what? It gave me a level of confidence applying, because as much as a lot of these people may have had some great knowledge or skill sets in digital marketing, not one of them knew how to sell themselves and really make an impactful video. You know, some people were just holding up their phone and doing all this sort of thing. And some people were like, speaking in front of a camera, but their place wasn't set up nicely. Like there was just so many red flags. I've been recruiting for ages. So I'm like, there's just so many flags in all of these videos that I'm like, I don't want to even, I would never hire any of these people. So I thought maybe I could stand out. So I made a 3-minute video, but the 3-minute video incorporated a minute and a half of me just sort of humbly trying to be humble about like, I'm pretty good at this, I'm pretty good at that. I could tell you all these things about what I've done with my company here, there, and there, but that won't really be as much of an impact as if I just, have the people I've worked with tell you. And so then it cuts, and I have like 7 or 8 people that I had worked with who were great people, but some of them had just recently left the company, some of that, and they actually all were willing to record like, a couple minutes on why I was a great person to hire. And they did an awesome job. I cut it all together with some music, and then 3 minutes in, done, sent it off to them. And I remember they actually, like, what I learned later was half the people never even did that assignment. So immediately, they're not even executors or didn't really want this job. Of the 100 and some odd people, I rose to the top really quickly because it was a produced thing. It was a project that I put some effort and time into. So like, wow, this guy's got something. And they said to me, let's do an interview. So I got an interview with some of the key people. They said I was going to talk to Jeff. And then it got to the point where they were like, you know what? We like you. We really think you're great. However, we're not ready for you. We don't even know if we're going to sell this program, which was called Launch Club. They were just creating it. So they said, can we keep you on our list for later? And I'm like, sure, whatever, I guess so. And I was a little disappointed, but I went back to my knife selling job. I moved to Vancouver. I got out of that whole bad situation I was in. I, did a bunch of work in Vancouver to build the office up. I was in the same company. And a year and a half later, I changed my number, changed my email. I forgot all about it in some ways, a year and a half later, I got a message on LinkedIn from the person who was the hiring manager. And she said, are you still looking for something? We might have something for you now. And that was where I said, okay, let me see what you got. And that's how I got into Jeff's world. It was crazy. And I also just this week talked with Jeff about that situation. And he had said to me, I only looked at maybe 2 or 3 people. And there was just something that I noticed when I was looking through you and your YouTube content. Because here's what was interesting. Because I was on my YouTube. They probably sent my video, right? And my video rose to the top. But I wasn't the only video that I had put out. On my YouTube channel, I had also done a rap song that was a parody of Notorious B.I.G.'s The 10 Crack Commandments, but I had done them as the 10 Cutco Commandments. And it was all about selling knives. And he looked at that, and to Jeff, that stood out. And he said, there's something about this guy. He's got something. Let's get him in an interview. And it's weird to look back on that and say how much different my life, these little threads that somehow got me, from the Tim Ferriss podcast to the, being in a disgruntled mood on the day they sent that hiring email to, them remembering me a year and a half later and just checking my LinkedIn messages that day, to Jeff watching my video that they were, and then I had put that up and kept it up there forever. This rap video that I decided to make, and all of those things wound up getting me into Jeff's world, where now I have this wonderful career and I get to be around amazing and awesome entrepreneurs from all over the world, and have an impact on changing the world positively.
I love it. And how long have you been with Jeff? Like, when did that go?
I started with him. I'm probably in my 7th year with him right now.
Oh, wow. So yeah. A while. Yeah.
Yeah. Around 2016 is when I jumped in. Yeah. Right at the beginning of 2016, I believe.
How did they handle the pandemic? Because that was a real game changer.
It really was. A couple of things. One of the things when it first hit, I'm the guy on the team that does any of the phone calls. So if you're phone calling, I'm probably the guy on the phone with you, just because nobody else likes to talk on the phone. And I don't like it, but I can do it a lot better than most people because I phone people over and over and over in my old job. So I'm pretty comfortable. One of the things, and I think this is really speaks to who Jeff is he said, we're just going to give you a list of people who are kind of our owners and people, and we want you to call them just to check in on them and see, like, what are people feeling? What are they thinking about? We want that feedback. We really do, because we're not quite sure what we should be doing right now as a company, and whether it makes sense for us to launch. Does it make sense for us to, give something away for some sort of value? And like, what is it? And so again, instead of diving in, assuming he knows, Jeff is willing to listen. And so he sent me on a mission to call. I must have called, not in significant. A couple hundred people probably I called over a week or so of just like interacting, and I got some great feedback. And one, it was a great kind of level 10 experience where they're like, wow, this is really nice that this person that I subscribed to on an email list, and maybe I'm part of his product launch formula. It's they were willing to reach out and just, no, I'm not selling anything. I just wanted to kind of check in. Like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Like, what's going on? How are things? And I bring all that information back to the team so that Jeff can craft a high value driven launch where, we always say, if you're going to join up for our program, that is great. But if you're not, come to our masterclass, or what we called the Silverton at that time masterclass, where Jeff, his whole objective is, I'm going to give away the absolute best stuff I can for free. It is the best hands down launch training of how to build an online business without being inside my program. Okay. So of course I'm still going to do that, but, we also made it available for people to jump into the program if they wanted to at that point. But we had a great launch right at that moment. And we also extended our payment options at that moment too, so that people who were in a rougher or harder situation, or maybe they really needed this, but they couldn't quite afford to pay the first payment, they could get in and start building their list and that sort of thing. And again, so we reacted that way, in a way of like, let's be leaders. Let's figure out a way to do a live launch where we provide massive value and, yes, give people an opportunity, but a better opportunity with an extended payment plan to take this to a new level. And really, they reacted. People reacted great to it. Our company was really, we pivoted very, very well, and it wound up being a great year for us too. Because I think a lot of people wound up coming into our world and starting to find that they could build their own business online rather than have to be beholden to the mandates that were being put down upon other people.
Yeah, no kidding. And I like what the strategy was: go connect with people. I teach market research, and one of you have to connect with your audience and find out where they're at, what they want. And if it's bad news, don't freak out. Good, get the bad news, then just make that adjustment, the right way. I like what you also said too prior to that question, where when we were talking about how you came to work with Jeff Walker and the launch team, and you said it was like a perfect sort of, all your experiences came to play. So that means, how you were raised by your parents in terms of, go do things and try new things and be open. Don't just read, not that's really important.
Read too.
Yeah. For sure. But do other things. And then, your schooling with the theater and the improv work and the creativity, and then your sales career with Cutco knives. And for those that don't know, Hal Elrod, wonderful human being, like survived cancer and a horrific car accident, wrote the book Miracle Morning, and also the new version of it, which I have in my other room, and I'd go get it. And it's a new version of the Miracle Morning, but it's really about having morning rituals.
Yeah,
I like how you're bringing the whole of you to the table, and I really give you credit for that, Chris. In terms of then, how can nerdpreneurs bring their whole selves to the table? We've talked a lot about it already. If you were to coach a nerdpreneur who has that, or just an entrepreneur who has that off the wall idea like dice, and they're wavering on launching, what would your advice be?
My biggest advice for people when they are ready to kind of step into, I think, a bigger world. I just let me just read a quote. I want to make sure I get it right, but I just heard it, okay. And it's really great. Like, little things become big things in a small world.
Yes.
And I've had to think about that one for a while, because it just keeps coming up for me and keeps resonating. It's from a guy named Michael Maidens. I believe he came up with it. Someone that I've met through Jeff and some of the businesses that I work with. But when you're on the edge right now and you might be worried like, oh, can I do this? Should I do this? You should dive in and, however you do those like get into a bigger world, otherwise some of these little things are going to become really big things to you. And so stepping out of your comfort zone is the way a lot of people like to put it, and being willing to do that, because that's where the magic happens. We've probably all seen that graphic where there's that circle or comfort zone, and then out here is the magic. You've got to be willing to step outside of the comfort zone. And so that might be, and I'll tell you, on Nerdpreneur, I heard this a lot. I was very nervous about putting out my first piece of content. I was very nervous about asking for money for what I was doing. And once they do step out into that next level, that's where the magic happens. That's where you can shift. That's where you can pivot. You're stepping into a bigger world. Be willing to make that jump. Be willing to make that step, because when you get there, then you can actually look back and all those big things that were part of that small world, they're not as big anymore, and they aren't going to be as big of a deal. I always say that if your content sucks, the algorithm protects you. No one's going to see it. So there's not really much risk of just putting out content. And you know what? If it sucks, you're going to get better. But at least that milestone of putting it out there, the more you do it, the more you actually post out there, and the faster you're going to get better at doing it, and the more confident you're going to be about it. I look back at my earliest content, it's my worst content. The first is the worst. Same with launching. Your first launch is your worst launch. But by going through it, you learn a lot about your market. You learn a lot about you. You also learn a lot about your offer. And all of that information is so valuable that when you come back to do it again, you'll be able to do it at a much higher percentage of, say, success. And you'll steadily get better and better and better,
Yeah. And then also too, you'll get used to failing, mm-hmm. and take that worry and fear out of failing and look at it as a learning opportunity. And it's going to stretch you, because failing is not the most comfortable. When things are going well, you're comfortable. You're in that comfort zone when it's going well. But when you're not succeeding maybe the way you want, you're more open to learning, trying new things, making adjustments. In terms of these kind of nerdpreneur businesses being viable financially, you focused on a few in the 26 minutes version. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that moving forward, can they attract venture capital or investment, or are they flying too under the radar?
It really is. How profitable can you be? Like, one of the people we actually interviewed took a very different route than this, and we call him a nerdpreneur, but he is a professional dungeon master or game master, and his name is Devin. He actually runs a website called startplaying.games. And his entire model was he got a big Bloomberg article, and we actually talk about how he landed that. We talk about from there how he started to get investors and started to go to various venture capital firms looking for investment, because he was looking to create an entire website where people could connect game masters with players so that people could actually start becoming what they call professional game masters, playing tabletop role-playing games of all different sorts. So the answer is yes. I do believe that is a model for some people, especially if you have a viable business where there's a clear market. And again, like going into those things, they're going to be looking for your you to have your numbers right. You have to have offers that people are willing to buy. You have to have a growth opportunity. So, but again, right now, there's so many people wanting what nerdpreneurs have. Mm-hmm. There's so many people that want to figure out, how do I become a full-time game master? How do I get to do that and make money? Because I don't want to work in my, corporate job anymore. I don't want to work. And many people who are doing this are young people who are stuck in like service jobs that they
Yeah,
just don't
quiet
want to do
quitting.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't. It's not. They don't want to be restaurant people anymore. They don't want to be in retail anymore. They don't want to have to, do that. And many people also, with the advent of AI, have huge opportunities right now to be able to create their own business. Now, there are tools and strategies and techniques that we unearth on Nerdpreneur that will help you get there faster. And that's what we're looking to do, is try and teach and inspire people to get to that level faster, and also to believe that they can do it. Because if you listen to some of these episodes, you'll find out that many of them were not much different than any of you when they started. They were just a nerd with some passion and a willingness to try. And you know what? They became business people. They learned through doing and through asking questions, being willing to fail and put themselves out there. But that failure didn't last. See, that first step is only the first step. And it's the first that gets you out there. But then once you continue to walk, continue to move forward, continue to climb the hill, eventually you're going to get to the summit. And that's where nerdpreneur success, entrepreneurship can live. And maybe that is for getting investors in you, might be, but you got to build it first. And that is a route to go. We have had people on our podcast that have taken that route.
Is it a growth field, do you feel?
100%. I actually believe that we're a little ahead of the curve in terms of branding it. I think that Nerdpreneur will be something that will become commonplace in our vernacular in the future. What are you? I'm a nerdpreneur. What does that mean? Well, I pursue my passion to follow, and I followed that, and I developed this really great business that I love and is also ethical and good. That's the other thing. I believe the rise of ethical capitalism is not only inevitable, but also really important, really important right now.
Yeah, we've had enough.
People don't really realize that, I think, and we actually talk about this in one of our next episodes coming out, but there's sort of an advent of an aggression against capitalism. But, and I can understand why people will say that, because there are reasons, there are ways to run businesses that are unethical. And there are ways to run businesses where they do not care about the impact. But we as consumers have more power in our choices than ever before. And by choosing the companies that really do align to our values, that's how we're going to fix that situation, by rising up the businesses that are willing to serve and do the right thing and provide for their market, yes, the value that they're looking for, but also not at the expense of other people's lives or damaging it. And if your business can't run that way, then it shouldn't be in business. Yeah. So that there are a lot of companies that I'm finding and by the way, these nerdpreneurs, they have that, almost all of them have that mentality. They're young, they're either under 30, under 40, millennials, Gen Z people who want to create a bigger and better world. They want that. They actually want to change the world. And I love that about the nerdpreneurs that we have coming on our podcast, because they're not interested in just making money. They're interested in having a rich, satisfying life, doing what they love, while also creating a company that thrives and provides value for their people and improves the world. And so there's a real impact to whatever your business is going to be. And I encourage people to embrace that they can create that business in an ethical and awesome way while providing amazing value.
And that's what this show is also inspiring.
Yeah.
It's inspiring the next level or the next generation of entrepreneurs to really be leaders and to know what it takes to lead. And yeah. Now, a couple quick questions before we wrap. This has been great. And by the way, at the beginning or before we were, went on air today, we talked about a clip that I could take from what you said, and I think you just said it. So I think I'm going to take that clip.
Great.
Yeah. Now, in terms of profiles of nerdpreneurs, are men more nerdier than the women you've talked to?
And that is funny. I think that, again, how do you define nerd, right? Is a thing. And it's funny, the word nerd has gone through so many identity changes all the way through, right? Because if I said nerd in the 80s, it wasn't a good thing. Even in the 90s, it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah,
but then
geek or nerd or
yeah, exactly. It's like you're a geek, you're a nerd. It was somebody who made,
glasses.
yeah, you make fun of them. There was like that. And then, even Revenge of the Nerds, that whole like movie franchise was
That was a
making
great
fun of
movie.
nerds. But yeah, it was kind of funny, right? Well, but I think that we don't want to just say like, oh, that's what it is. But we're trying to, in a many sense, rebrand the word, and it's become something much cooler. And it used to always be that men are nerdy, right? There wasn't really a female nerd, and if they were like the one weird girl who played D&D or video games, right?
I'm Bialik on,
Yeah, exactly, right. And so that's and again, like Big Bang Theory has sort of also popularized the idea of nerd, even though I don't particularly embrace the image of what it is. I appreciate that they did give those people dates. You know what I'm saying? Like they got them out there and got them interacting with women. At least there was some good things there. I will just say though that in answer to your question, between men and women, it is really an even spread nowadays. I don't see much of a difference in terms of like, well, what women are into video games. Well, there's a lot of women into playing video games now. Okay. There's a lot of women who play Dungeons and Dragons. It's so much more diverse in terms of that than ever before. And the thing that unifies is that people who are passionate and excited about what they're doing, they get a chance to find their community and be able to resonate with a community that loves them, accepts them, and loves the thing that they are also in. And that's one of the reasons why Dungeons and Dragons, I think, has become such an incredible force in society, is because at a base level, it is about acceptance. It's about playing different characters who have all sorts of different features and benefits and different ways of being, but everything is accepted in that community, and so I think because of that level of acceptance and that richness that you get around those people, it's so welcoming. You're going to have more women, more men, more they, more them, all the way through. You're going to have anybody coming into these things. You don't really have to be a guy to be a nerdpreneur. You just have to be passionate. You just have to have a will and excitement and an ambition to make something out of what your passion is and serve your people. And that's open for everybody.
Yeah. Well, a couple more questions. Is there a marketing formula? I saw the interview with Malaji, the harpist.
Melody, yeah.
Malaji, sorry. And she got into this, sort of like not by accident, but she started to make her mark doing music for video games.
Yeah.
How did she do that?
I think that there is something, and this is something we do too, is being on social media, understanding the trends. If she started off doing like, I'm going to do Celtic harp music, that is something she does, but it's not probably going to have a mass appeal. And you'll see this all the time now, is like there are things online that get you attention. And then there's things online that, make you money. Right. And those two things aren't always in alignment, but you do need both. You need to have both if you're going to utilize social media. So with Melody, for example, her doing the Zelda theme on harp and her kind of branding it with her image and the way she did it. Well, there are way more fans of Zelda than there are of ancient Celtic harp music, right? Now, what happens is they start in, that's like her first sort of lead magnet in many ways. It's like, come in for the video game music of Zelda or, whatever else she's doing in that market around video games, because you could do that for any number of different franchises that are popular, right? And then you can also bring them in to be like, hey, I also do this Celtic harp thing. And then some people wind up really enjoying the Celtic harp, because one of the things you'll do if you follow Melody is that you'll see that, hey, this is a 500-year-old, harp piece that I found, and it's beautiful, and she does it, and you're like, oh, that's really cool too, but I came for the video games, right? And so you have to know, like, what are the trends in your market? Like for us, when Dungeons and Dragons is releasing D&D 1, we do a D&D 1 episode about what they're talking about there, just to ride the trend of that, right? Like when AI was, it's still a big thing. AI is a huge part of some of our upcoming themes. We're going to incorporate AI into how does that affect nerdpreneurs? How does that that affect, how people interact, on dating platforms, which is actually something we did already. We released an episode on AI wingman, which is about having ChatGPT as your wingman when talking to girls or talking to guys, by the way.
Oh my God.
So we did a whole episode on that. So well, but the thing is, it's like there's things like that we're riding the trends, and so there's value in getting the attention. But then you have to once you have someone's attention, give them something they really want and need, so that you can move them through to other things that potentially they might buy, whether it be extended content like what we offer on Nerdpreneur, where we do extra interviews and bonus content and behind the scenes of how to make a podcast and how to build your audience, all these things like that. But also people will, or maybe it's, they get to buy your next Dungeons and Dragons book that you're releasing, or maybe they buy a ticket to your next live show, or they buy, however you're going to monetize what you're doing. Get the attention through riding trends, because many things there are memes in society. If you're aware of what they are, you can ride the trends of the memes and get attention, and then build the bridge from that attention to your other thing where people actually buy and purchase something from you.
Brilliant. And I like the fact that you're combining something. You're taking two totally different things and putting them together. And if you're looking at history, Gutenberg, when he invented the printing press, did just that. The ink from the wine making machine or the wine press, and the imaging, from printing, or not printing, but what was it? It was like a stamping machine,
Oh, yeah.
So he said, okay, I can combine these, and now that's how the printing press came to be.
And then you can mass produce, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happened? Last question. Well, almost. What have you learned about yourself since you've created this podcast?
I learned a lot through launching various podcasts. And, in the past, I had a podcast which was called You Roll the One. It's still out there, but it was an actual play where we played Dungeons and Dragons. And it was me. I always wanted to have a successful podcast. I always wanted to have my own show, the ability to create something that was kind of mine. But it was myself and then 4 other people who were the cast. And it was great. The content was solid. However, when I was doing it, it was really me driven. It was 100% me. Like, I would set up the times we meet. I would do all the recording, editing. I would do all the production and sound effects and music. And then I would do all the marketing. And I was working with 4 other people, but I was pushing the boulder up a hill. And I realized fairly quickly, maybe not too quickly. I did it for like 2 years almost. And I realized that they were never really going to get to the point of being as excited about what we were building as I was. And so being an entrepreneur is difficult when you're even if you have a lot of resources or people helping you. When you have nobody helping you, nobody supporting you, it can be very, very difficult. And so I've learned, especially through Nerdpreneur, the balance of having a co-host with me, so I'm not doing all of this solo, and I've picked the right co-host that has a similar value system in terms of where we want to go, the ambition to get it done, and the trust to execute and continue to do that. I have learned that is some of the keys to success that I need, is a partner in doing this. And by getting the right partner that I can go and bounce ideas off of, and I'll tell you, we have some episodes you'll hear where it's just us. So we have interview episodes, and then we have episodes where it's just Frank and I. And I love those Frank and I episodes, because sometimes we're just talking about the podcast and where we're going, and sometimes he'll balance me out on some of these things, right? Like, here's where I want to go. I'm very big picture, and he'll be like, "Okay, Chris, well, let's ground this in what we actually can do right now. Like, let's get." And I'll get frustrated about getting to success, and he'll balance me out a little bit.
He's the numbers.
Yeah, very much. And it's great to have that contrast. And also, like, I'll open up the interview. Like, I'll go out and sell people on being on our podcast. Not that it takes much to sell them. It's an awesome experience, and everyone who comes on wants to do it. But I'll just say that it's like I'm the guy who opens up the doors, but I can't tell you how many times I could drop the ball on like scheduling if I didn't hand it off to Frank. Frank is really good at like, okay, he's going to set all the times, make sure everybody's logistics are set up, send them the pre-show form, make sure they get into, the places they need to so that we have a really great success. So he's kind of got a lot of those systemized things down. So I've really learned about myself is I play to my strengths. And you know what? If you can find the right partner, I mean, you don't have to be good at everything, but you should have somebody that ideally can balance you out and also work hard on the areas that you may not be that good at. And you don't have to be good at everything to be successful, but you should always play to your strengths and do what you are best at so that you can spend the most time in your genius zones, I guess, if you want to call them that, where you can provide a lot of value and do more. I think that's something that I've really learned about myself. And also, it's easy to be hard on yourself. And there are times in our journey where we want more than what we're getting. And it can be very easy for us to look at ourselves and beat ourselves up in order to get ourselves to move. And I talk with Frank a lot about this because I think sometimes the dynamic, he often is the kind that will beat himself up in order to make something happen. And he won't mind me talking about that because we talk about it on our podcast. But I have learned that it doesn't have to be, make myself feel like crap in order to move. You can actually do it in a very kind way. And I've seen that with many of our nerdpreneurs. I've seen that with my own self. And I've seen it also with my co-host, Frank, where when we bring ourselves a little bit of kindness and a little bit of patience, and we remind ourselves, where we're going, why we're doing it, and that we get to do this, not that we have to do it, that we get to have this opportunity to talk with these people. We get to release an episode to our audience each month or each week. We get to do these with that mindset shift of instead of I have to do it. And instead that this is all a gift, the ability for us to be more productive and happier through the process. I know that is what really works for me. And I encourage others to make the process as easy as they can for themselves so that they can enjoy that too.
Yeah, so important. And if you want a book to read about that process, Coach Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, Gap in the Game. And because a lot of entrepreneurs live in the gap, we're not good enough. I don't have enough money. I'm not where I want to be, right? It's not a very nice place to be. But if you look at your life and you go, okay, what have I accomplished in the past 3 months? Well, I've done this, and this. It's like, yeah, wow, that far outweighs the gain, far outweighs the gap. So you actually get to look and go, you know what, I'm better off than I thought, right? Because we're always focused on what we don't have, what we're not yet, or, we haven't achieved that pinnacle, but whatever, just enjoy the journey,
Yeah. Be willing to look back on your progress. I hear that from so many nerdpreneurs is that because this is just part of entrepreneurship is you're gonna have those days where you feel down or inadequate or whatever. And on those days, when these are questions that we ask them, it's like, what do you do when you get stuck, right? Or when you have those down days? So many of them will say, I look back on what I used to be like or what I used to do. And then I look at what I just did and how many more people are, say, reacting to what I do, how many more messages that I've received in terms of this. It feeds them to say, wow, look at my journey and how far I've come. And I think that is so powerful to remind yourself, that you didn't start off perfect and you're not perfect now. You just have to recognize the progress. Perfect doesn't exist and just keep making progress.
Yep. You didn't start off walking.
No, exactly. And there's that old, I think it's Jim Rohn who says, it's like, how long would you give a kid until you tell them to give up on walking?
Yeah.
And it's like, no. You don't just like, oh, well, I guess they're never going to learn it. How many times would they need to fall for you to say, just give up? No, you do it until.
Yeah.
until they learn, right? And so if you're in that business, that's sort of the mentality you have to have. It's like learning how to walk. You have no skills in business. Well, you're going to learn them quicker by doing business than you will by sitting on the sidelines watching videos about business. Okay. So one of our people, Emeka, he credits I think Grant Cardone or Gary Vaynerchuk for this. Probably was Gary, but I think it was one of those things where he said, look, if you're scrolling and watching me right now, just stop and get busy. Like, you shouldn't even be doing this right now. You should be out there hustling, doing this thing that you're trying to do, building your life, building your business, building your momentum. And momentum's the most powerful force in business. Once you get out there, it starts going, you're going to start making progress. Scrolling is not momentum. Scrolling is wasting time. Scrolling is a way to distract ourselves. And so he actually stopped listening to anything online, and immediately right after that video went off to work on his business. And I'll leave that story for when you listen to his actual episode, because it is crazy what he was able to generate out of that first business with it was called the Black NES guy.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, we're out of time. I'm so grateful to you.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful to be on here. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I had a good time too, and I want to have you back to talk about ChatGPT.
Oh yeah.
Okay. But where can we reach you again? And connect, of course, with your work and Nerdpreneur and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for Nerdpreneur, you can find us on all podcast platforms. That's Nerdpreneur. All right, Nerdpreneur. And same on Twitter or Instagram or YouTube or wherever you want to find us. We are probably there at Nerdpreneur Pod or Nerdpreneur Podcast. So you can also find me if you want to interact directly with me at Professor Epic Productions. You can check out my D&D content there. I do have memes that I put out there. I kind of do jokes and stuff. And also I tend to put out any sort of music that I put out there as well. And that's where you'll find me.
And you're doing, you know what I love about this? You're doing your thing, man. You're doing your gift and you're doing your joy. And because I think you would die, going to work with, a bank or whatever insurance company, you would.
That was never on my I don't begrudge people who love it. Like my mom is in the insurance business. She loves it. But you know what? I know for me, like she's wanted me to go into her business or take over her business for many years. And I just knew from what I understand about it and who I know of myself that it wasn't where I wanted to be. So pursue your passion. You can make money doing it. And continue to do the things you love doing and remain authentic, because authenticity is what sells nowadays, not anything else.
No. And people can smell that,
Oh, exactly.
Nerdpreneur, this is great. Thank you, those listening, hearing us. I hope you enjoyed 26 Minutes With, and then our deeper dive. Sure. Where do we reach you to learn more about your work with Nerdpreneurs?
If you'd like to listen to us, you'll find us at Nerdpreneur. If you want to find us anywhere, Nerdpreneur is the phrase. So we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, all of your podcast apps, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify to Stitcher. You're gonna put in Nerdpreneur, you can find us. There's nobody else out there that's doing what we're doing. So I always tell people, if you like what we're doing, you can support us on Patreon/Nerdpreneur, and you'd be supporting the one and only nerdy business podcast in the world right now. And we would love that because there's not enough people out there that know about all the Nerdpreneur people.
I hope you enjoyed this interview Chris had on the 26 Minute Show. If you'd like to support our show and get more of our content, head on over to patreon.com and join our board of Nerdpreneurs, where you're going to get all of our episodes unedited. And there's a backlog of them. We've got interviews with other Nerdpreneurs, as well as Talking Nerdy episodes where Chris and I dive deep into a topic. So head on over to patreon.com and join our board of Nerdpreneurs. So until next time, keep it nerdy.